You're listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast, where I'll be giving valuable insight and thought-provoking perspectives about the connections between our hair and how we live our daily lives. I know that many of you have heard people talking about Jerry curls and pressing curls, high top fades and sporting waves, the best products for your hair, and so much more. But what you haven't heard is how our hair can be a full reflection of what's going on in our hearts, what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our bodies, and what's going on in our souls. I'm your host, Darius Peace, and I'm excited to be your weekly guide on the journey to having better hair and a better life. We are currently living in a time where identity is everything. People now want to be accepted and acknowledged for who and what they say they are. So if I say I'm a goldfish and that I want to be identified as they and not he or she, then the world around us is expected to comply with whatever I say my identification is. And so, throughout centuries, people have experienced torture, terrorism, torment, and ridicule for being different. But now a new generation has decided, you know what? We clapping back and we're standing against gender biases, gender norms, sexual orientation restrictions, sexual and gender identity restrictions, and so forth. Because at the end of the day, so many people have suffered in the past and people are fed up. Enough is enough. Even job HR systems have become compliant with non-prohibitive actions and behaviors against gender and sexual orientation discrimination. I mean, it's shaken up everything around us. But I want to put a pin in this conversation just for one moment so that we can listen to a word from this episode's sponsor.
Visit HayaBeauty.com. That's HAYAH beauty.com, or give us a call 205-703-8022 for questions, for information, or to book your appointment.
Beauty can take you higher. The mission is to inspire. I am, I was, and I always will be. Beauty higher. Beauty can take you higher. The mission is to inspire. And I always choose to start my day with higher beauty.
So my wife and I have 5 children, and one of the most common conversations that we've been having over the years with all of them has been that of gender identity. And it's come up because in their classroom, there are a lot of students who may opt for being acknowledged as something different than what they are. And so when I'm talking about gender identity, I'm just going to go over a list of what I'm talking about. So there are some that will identify as male. There are students and people. This is not just students, but this is people. But, in the conversation with our kids, because they're growing up at a different time than what we did, this is what their experience is in the classroom. So you've got those who like to identify as male. You got those who identify as female. You've got those who identify as cisgender. And so for those of you who don't know, cisgender refers to a person who identifies as the gender that aligns with what they were assigned at birth. So, choosing to identify as male or female and you were born male and female would put you in the category of cisgender. And then there's transgender. Transgender refers to a person who identifies as a gender that is different from their assigned sex at birth. You've got gender neutral, which can also fall in the category of non-binary. Non-binary is a term that's used by people who don't describe themselves or their gender as being fit in either category, male or female. You got agender. That's an adjective that can describe a person that doesn't identify as any gender. Pangender describes a person who's more flexible with their gender identity and may be associated with the typical gender binary. You've got genderqueer. Got a lot of different gender identities, but then you've also got, along with that, pronouns as a topic. And that's one of the things that I noticed that is a is a topic at hand in their classrooms, but not even just their classrooms, also in the corporate sector. When I go different places and I get different emails, at the end of the email, I typically notice that somebody is showcasing whatever their pronoun identification is, whether it's he, him, or them, they, or she, her. But the use of these pronouns has become very common across the board in both personal as well as professional settings. Now, I'm going to admit the pronoun topic gets very complicated to me. It gets very confusing to me, and sometimes it gets very frustrating to me. And when I recognize my blood pressure going up because I'm stressed about trying to figure out how to refer to someone in pronoun form, I just opt to call them by their name. Whatever your first name is, whatever your called name is, that's what I'm going to call you. And that way I get to dismiss all the pronouns to get all together. And if that means I got to say your name 50 times in one sentence, then I'm going to say your name 50 times in one sentence, because for me, that's the safest way I see fit to do this in order to preserve my sanity, as well as acknowledge each individual respectfully by their name. So, that's what I choose to do. In the beginning, when my kids started informing us about some of these changes with their peers, it brought about a lot of confusion and frustration for me and my wife. And the reason why is because, that being a focus in the classroom was a throw off, because I'm like, wait a minute, okay, what are these kids' grades like? Are their grades good? Are you doing good in math while you trying to identify as this or that? Is your mental health good while you trying to identify as this or that? What are your people skills like while you trying to identify as this or that? I just thought that was a distraction from I think that there are topics that really trump that one to me. And I don't know. It just created a lot of frustration for me. And I'm getting over that, because at the end of the day, what I do know is that the world is changing. The world is expanding, as it always does. And I just got to get down with the get down, because it is. And so, for example, if a person chooses to, and I'm just sticking with this pronoun thing for a minute before I close that out. So if a person chooses to identify as the pronoun they, and I wanted to bring this up because this was one of the frustrations that I experienced. If a person chooses to identify as the pronoun they, that makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm sorry, it just does not, because they, in my education background, has always been referenced in plurality with people. They refers to more than one person, more than one individual, more than one thing, not more than one being. It's not singular. So to refer to one person as they just makes no grammatical sense to me. And I'm still to this day choosing to comply with the original grammar that I have been taught, because I can always opt to call a person by their name instead of going against what I've learned as correct grammar. So, okay, closing it right there. I just wanted to get that out before I closed it, because at the end of the day, as I said before, the world is changing. The world is expanding. The minds of people are growing, and there are a lot of great things that have really come from the world being shaken up with gender identity and focus and topics on sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is really a separate reference from gender identity. For example, a transgender person may be straight, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer. So an example of, and another example of that would be people who are transitioning from male to female. They may solely be attracted to men, but they may identify as a straight woman. And a similar example is when a woman transitions from female to male, and is solely attracted to men as a female, and her transition choose to identify as a gay male. So that's one of the things that differentiates sexual orientation from gender identity. And I mention that because there are a lot of people who will say that gender identity and sexual orientation is the same thing, but it's really not. It's very, very complex. And to be quite frank, again, I believe that a lot of the focus on gender identity can be a distraction from an even bigger picture, which I think is sexual health and the prevention of sexually transmitted infections. You know, like I said before, I also think that when it comes to kids and gender identity, I think that there should be a greater focus on their grades. I mean, on your grades, your mental health, your ethical morale, your people skills. Shoot, your hygiene really should trump that topic on identity. And I'm saying that right now, but again, the world is growing. I'm growing. The world's expanding. I'm expanding. So I might think something totally different tomorrow. But I think I'm ready to tackle this conversation without any condemnation or judgment. I know some toes are being stepped on, but that's okay, because the conversation needs to take place. In fact, I think that the root of many people's resistance to the conversation and topic of identity and sexual orientation is really the fear of talking about sex, period. And the many acts and forms and ways that sex is done and the ways that sex is presented. I believe that the fear of talking about sex is what leads many people to shame, depression, as well as the spread of STIs due to misinformation and malinformation. And when I say STIs, I am referring to sexually transmitted infections. That's the new way of saying STDs. We used to call it STDs back in the day, which was sexually transmitted diseases. But now it's being referenced as sexually transmitted infections. So as I was saying, running away from sex conversations can cause a lot of harm and a lot of danger, as well as a lot of frustration in many relationships, especially familial relationships. So I make it my priority in many of my sex conversations to talk about sex safety and sexual health. Because at the end of the day, ain't nobody about to stop having sex no time soon. And the best way to navigate this reality to me is by focusing on what'll keep individuals healthy in every way, shape, or form when it comes to any and all acts of sex. I remember back in the 90s when the group TLC was real popular. They really gained their popularity because of their campaign on safe sex. So they would wear condoms on their clothing. And I remember the member Left Eye would actually wear a condom on the left side of her glasses. And it was really a way to showcase sexual liberation as well as encourage sexual health with people, because during that time we were coming out of, well, I don't want to say coming out of, but there was a lot of focus on the global AIDS epidemic, and a lot of people were dying left and right. And we're not talking about just people who were of the homosexual community, because that was how AIDS was. It was just really it targeted. So the way it was communicated to us was that AIDS was a gay disease, and that wasn't true, because there were people across the board who were actually dying from AIDS. It wasn't just a gay disease. It was a sexually transmitted disease in many cases, or a disease that was transmitted through improper sharing of needles with drug injections. And so there were just a lot of different things that came along with that right there. You want to say something here?
Intravenous drug use.
Yes, come on with it. Yes, the bigger words, intravenous drug use, because that's what it was. And so, that was one of the ways that it was spread. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that it was taught that it was a gay disease by many homophobes, but it really was not and is not a gay disease. It is a disease that is sexually transmitted or intravenously transmitted. Thank you for the intravenous word. Yes. So, but yeah, and not just TLC. I remember Snoop Dogg, in some of his songs would talk about, having a pocket full of rubbers, you know what I'm saying, so that he can get up on them hoes, as he would say. And other rap artists would do the same same thing. There was just more campaign and more focus on the practice of safe sex to prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases, now known as sexually transmitted infections. Even Salt and Pepper, they had a song, Let's Talk About Sex, just to take away all of the taboo that came along with the conversation. And I think that now, well, they wanted to really just overall dismiss the taboo that came along with discussions of sex. And now that we're living in a time where sexual fluidity is more common and more popular, I really don't see or hear about as many mainstream campaigns surrounding the topic of sex. I mean, I don't. Do you, Eric? Like, I'm just trying to think, I don't see many. Like, not that I can see, because it was really pronounced then. It was everywhere. And now I don't hear it as much. What I hear more now is people really campaigning and discussing the acceptance of people regardless of what their orientation may be.
Yeah, I definitely I agree with you. I don't feel like I see any campaigns around safe sex.
Yeah, right.
And that was such a huge thing, I would say, from the time I was like 12, honestly.
Yes.
All the way up to, I felt like I was maybe in my early 20s,
Yeah.
and then I stopped seeing it.
Yeah.
Even on TV shows, at least that I watch, that would be a topic. And then they'd have a little excerpt, call this number, go to this website.
Yeah, they sure would.
Right?
Yep.
But now it's shifted to sexuality and gender.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which are two different things.
Yeah.
Which are two different things, but not necessarily practicing safe intercourse.
And the thing is that once we get, when we're really getting in deeper on topics of sexual identity and sexual orientation, because sex is the root of it all, we've got to focus on the practice of safe sex, because if not, then we end up right back where we were in the prior to the early 90s, and we end up experiencing an epidemic that we really can prevent.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, and you've talked about this, it wasn't until the past 5 to 10 years that I learned how decimated the homosexual population was. And if that's the wrong terminology, y'all, I'm sorry. I'm really trying to use the correct terminology.
Yeah.
But the gay population, I think that's more friendly. The gay population was decimated during the 80s.
Oh my gosh.
By HIV and
Yeah.
AIDS. And just how scared they were.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't know what it was.
Mhm.
They thought it was a form of cancer at one
Yes.
point. Why I'm saying this is specific to what you said. I think we need to do one thing. Okay, yes, let's talk about gender and sexuality and inclusivity, and not othering others or othering people or being othered ourselves. But yes, we need to get back to that place where we are comfortable and actively talking about safe sex. Because if not, it's coming back.
It's coming back.
Something.
Yeah, something.
Something
Because
is coming
that's what
back.
happened with AIDS. Nobody saw that coming. And, when people, because a lot of people in the homosexual community were really shunned out. I mean, it was just because it was AIDS was deemed as a gay disease. It was one of those, oh yeah, push him away, get him out. Oh, if he's gay, he must have AIDS or she must have AIDS. And that's just, nothing about that was cool or is cool. But one of the ways that we can help prevent that from even occurring, again, not saying that the likelihood of it happening decreases when we increase our knowledge on safe sex and healthier sex practices. I've talked about this in several episodes of the My Hairy Nappy podcast. A few years ago, I participated in a workshop for hairstylists and barbers that was presented by an organization called AIDS Alabama, and the event was called Beauty in Knowing. And I know I mentioned this on previous episodes, but I mean, I mentioned it because it really was a very impactful workshop that was designed to inform and educate hairstylists and barbers about the resources that are available to people regarding the prevention and the treatment of sexually transmitted infections, as well as ways that we can both initiate, facilitate, and navigate conversations about sex in the most healthy and productive directions. So, because many people confide in their barbers and hairstylists on these topics, it's usually frowned upon in other areas of their lives, such as in their home lives, in their church lives, in their work lives. You can't really talk about sex hard there for real. And so AIDS Alabama was creative enough and thoughtful enough to recognize that hairstylists and barbers have such influence with people and are usually most confided in. Hey, let's equip them with what we need them to know so that they can better navigate these conversations and really direct people where they need to go and be to learn more and prevent the spread of what we don't need. So I'm always grateful to have participated in that workshop. It was definitely life-changing in the best way. And now what I'm choosing to do is use that information to equip everyone who's listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast with what I call more sex education. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us didn't get it. So let's talk about just different ways that we can practice safe sex. So condoms. When we were in this workshop, condoms was like one of the biggest topics in the workshop, because a lot of people don't know how to use condoms, and a lot of people don't know what kinds of condoms are out there. There are so many. There are male condoms that can be applied to an erect penis. And I should have prefaced this at the very beginning. I'm going to pause right here. If anybody is listening to this podcast from this point on, the subject matter can get very intense and probably very inappropriate for underage listeners. So if you got your kids in the room, or people who may not be comfortable with talking about sexuality in the way that I'm about to go there, because I'm going to be discussing the phallus as well as the vagina, I encourage you and suggest that you either turn this off and listen to it at a later time, or turn it off and listen to another episode of the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. Okay, now I'm moving on. So condoms, male condoms are typically applied to an erect male penis to prevent the exchange of fluids in sexual intercourse. You've got female condoms. Female condoms, I didn't even know that there was a such thing as a female condom. That was such a what? And so all those female condoms are not, they're said to not be as effective as male condoms. And that's because sometimes the female condom during intercourse can be pushed inside of the vagina, which can lead to fluid exchange as well as a skin-to-skin contact. But the thing what I think is very effective about the female condom is that it puts the female in control of her body in that regard. Because if you're depending on a male to have a condom, sometimes you could be in a situation and it's heated and the man may say, "Oh, I don't have a condom." And you decide to, out of an emotional decision, engage in that sexual activity anyway, and then hope that God is going to be your contraceptive or your condom. And and a lot of times God may be that savior from you either being pregnant or getting an STD, but sometimes that's not the case. So as a woman, when you have access to a female condom, you can wear that, especially if you know that things might get a little heated at the end of the evening, or depending on where you are in the middle of the day. They can be inserted hours before intercourse. So you can, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually put a female condom on up to 6 hours before intercourse takes place. And that way you're equipped for whatever happens. I would suggest that lubrication be used with it so that you can still experience a comforting pleasure on both ends. But that's just one way. I had no idea that the female condom existed. And then the other thing that was crazy about that to me was when I go to the stores, especially when you're going down the condom aisle, I don't ever see female condoms advertised or even showcased as much or marketed as much as I see male condoms. You see all forms, all sizes, all materials used for the male condoms, but I've never seen female condoms. You see all the lubricants, you see all the Plan Bs, you see all of that stuff, but I don't see female condoms inside of the stores. But I do know that they are accessible in most health departments. So if you're a female out there and you want to up your stock of female condoms, as well as get some education and information on how to best apply and insert them, go to your local health department. They are likely to be able to have free condoms for you to be able to practice with and use. There's dental dams. Dental dams are something that are very important because I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people are talking about oral sex and they think, well, if I do oral sex, I'm less likely to get pregnant. Well, yeah, you may not get pregnant with oral sex, but that does not mean that you're less likely to experience a sexually transmitted infection from that. I always tell people, you do not want to see cauliflower sprouting from where it don't need to be. Don't Nobody want no cauliflower coming off their coochie, and you don't want broccoli coming off your dick. So make a decision, and use a dental dam if you have, and no, you do have access to it, because these are all things that you can get at your local health department as well as your local drugstores. And because we all have access to online shopping now, you can always order online. I mean, we have, regardless of where we live now, if we're in the most rural of places or in the most metro of places, we have access to all of these forms of contraception as well as protection from infection. And the cool thing about the condoms in this case is that they protect against the spread of discharge, HIV, discharge that can lead to HIV, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. And they also protect against the STIs that are spread by skin-to-skin contact, such as syphilis, genital herpes, and HPV, which is also known as human papilloma virus. And when a lesion occurs in any area, it can be covered by the condom. So the stats say, according to the World Health Organization, that male condoms are usually 98% effective, while female condoms are usually 95% effective. And so that's a very slight difference, but they do work. So, and they can all help protect against unplanned pregnancies. And so you can get more information about that by Googling World Health Organization. Of course, the best way and the most effective way to prevent STIs is to practice abstinence from sex or long-term monogamy with a partner who's been tested and is diagnosed as STI free. I'm going to say that again just so y'all hear me. The best and most effective ways to prevent STIs is through abstinence from sex or long-term monogamy with one partner who has been tested and is diagnosed as STI free. Other ways to prevent the spread of STIs is through communication with your partner about sexual activity. Talk about your sexual expectations. Talk about your sexual health. Make it normal and comfortable to talk about sexual care. Using your condoms and dental dams correctly, can help prevent the exchange. If you don't know how to use them, you can always Google online. There are a lot of different diagrams that can showcase how to properly use condoms. I'm sure there's something on YouTube. And if not, you can always go to your local health department to learn the best and most effective way to apply your condom, apply your dental dams, and just correctly prevent the exchange of bodily fluids, as well as prevent skin-to-skin contact so that you can decrease the likelihood of having contact with infected skin or sores. Getting vaccinated, that's another way to prevent STIs. There are vaccinations that usually work for preventing the spread of hepatitis B and HPV. Those are usually the vaccination. Those are the STIs that are usually prevented by vaccination. That's HPV, human papilloma virus, and hepatitis B. Practicing sexual hygiene is another way to prevent the spread of STIs, and this means washing your genital areas before and after sex and not sharing towels or underwear. I repeat, wash your ass before and after having sex. Wash your thing. Wash your twat. Clean it up. There are a lot of people who don't know that. They just engage in sex based off what you see on TV. You watching a sex scene. You don't see any of that. You don't see nobody going to the bathroom, washing anything off before they engage or after they engage. But I'm telling you now, you got to wash that thing, keep it clean, and that's one way that you can prevent the spread of STIs. I mentioned not sharing towels. Don't be washing off with the exact same towel that whoever you were with used, and definitely don't be exchanging underwear. Why are you putting on their underwear? My gosh. Anyway, another way is reducing the amount of sexual partners. That can help. Safer sex counseling is one way to prevent it. Just talking to somebody. If you have inquiries about safe sex or sex and sexuality, period, there are counselors out there at your local health departments that can help guide you in the right direction as it pertains to safe sex. Post-exposure prophylaxis, such as taking, I think this is called dioxycline. This dioxycline, that's it, dioxycline, within 72 hours of exposure to certain infections can be a preventative measure. And then overall, getting tested for STIs is most important. I mean, most STIs don't even have symptoms, so you should definitely get tested as well as share your results, communicate your results to your partner, especially in cases where there are more than one partners involved. So, y'all, I always say it. I wanted to put this out there because I think that it's very important for us to get more comfortable and more confident in having the conversation as it pertains to sex, as it pertains to sexuality, as it pertains to practicing and acting on safe sex, good sexual hygiene, as well as being respectful and not distracted by topics such as gender identity and pronouns. Because at the end of the day, it can all go back to one root, and that is sex. And we got to talk about it, but more importantly, we got to make sure that we're practicing it safely and discussing it safely. So just remember, my hair ain't nappy, and your hair ain't nappy either. Until next time.
Speakers, coaches, experts, and entrepreneurs. Whether you're keynoting events, growing your business, or commanding the boardroom, you are highly skilled and accomplished at what you do. But something's missing. You don't have a cohesive brand to match your level of success. But not to worry, that's where we come in. We're Honeysuckle Lane Creative Co., and we create stunning visuals that capture the essence of your business and give you the online presence of your dreams. With a full suite of creative services, including photography, web design, graphic design, and marketing strategy, we make sure you're as extraordinary online as you are in your area of expertise. Ditch the DIY and work with an experienced team that gets results. Find us online at honeysucklelanecreative.com and on Instagram at honeysuckleLane_creative. Let's bring your brilliance to life with an unforgettable brand.
Thank you for listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. Reach out to us on social media. We're on TikTok and we're on Instagram at the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. We want to hear your stories. Until next time, love you and love your hair.